Ministry of Communications, Government of India. Mr. Jeffrey Clements, Chairman, Commonwealth Infrastructure Partners, United Kingdom. Mr. Sabyasachi Mitra, Deputy Country Director, Asian Development Bank. Romesh David, CEO, South Asia Gateways Terminals Private Limited, Sri Lanka. Julian Michael Bevis, Senior Director, Group Relations South Asia, Maersk Group. Rizwan Sumar, CEO and Managing Director, Indian Subcontinent, DP World UAE. And Olga Kulikova, Business Ambassador, Business Russia to India. And I'd also like to invite on stage our moderator for the session, Mr. Shiv Kumar Gunturu, Co-Chairman, Task Force on MSME and International Linkages, CII Southern Region, and CEO, Maple Software Private Limited. Thank you to all the panelists for joining us for this session. I'd now like to request Mr. Shiv Kumar Gunturu to take the session forward. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Honorable Minister for Civil Aviation, Shri Ashok Gajpati Raju Garu, and dignitaries on and off the dais. Good morning to everyone. Digital infrastructure provides the foundation for many new technologies, services, applications, and business models. There is a significant need to upgrade infrastructure to support urbanization. Challenges to digital infrastructure investment include geographic differences, regulatory uncertainties, high capital expenditure, etc. Therefore, it's very crucial that the digital infrastructure be provided and improved and made robust. Digital connectivity is the high-speed catalyst to India's partnership across the world, and to build digital connectivity through the use of gigabit-capable passive optical network. There has been, it's been welcomed by ASEAN countries, among other multilateral groupings. Besides, some of India's projects in the world will lead to strengthen digital as well as science and technology capacity, which includes space project envisaging establishment of tracking, data reception, data processing, and the stations in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, and upgradation of telemetry tracking and command station in Biak, that's in Indonesia, centers of excellence in software development and training in LDC countries. To mention a few of these establishments. In digital connectivity, the world needs a comprehensive overhaul of both in-country and cross-border regulations. And they need to address both supply side and demand side objectives. On the supply side, countries within the world should have and strive to strengthen the business case for investment in digital infrastructure, revisit regulations for key sectors such as financial services, and boost the local digital ecosystem. And on the demand side, many neighboring countries aim to create a single digital market to take steps to aggressively expand access to broadband. Radical steps could open avenues towards boosting the digital economy with a clear focus on developing ICT infrastructure. Connected devices are the future, as you know, the IoT devices, and the world has started to take notice and accordingly tweaking its digital strategies such that they are all future ready. Digital technologies in India and across the world may help facilitate trade, logistics, and innovation. A stronger digital network is also essential for startups, and India's digital prowess may fit well in serving ASEAN countries for their digital needs. Capturing digital innovation requires the establishment of regulatory framework for the delivery of new digital services, support for the sharing of best practices on open data, and equipping micro, small, and medium enterprises, that is MSME enterprises, with the capabilities to access these new technologies. This session will discuss on areas of collaboration on digital connectivity between India and the global economy, regulatory frameworks to support digital technologies, financing and development of digital infrastructure, technology adoption by micro, small, medium enterprises, etc. It will also guide us to build a cohesive and future-ready global digital economy. With this note, we have 6 panelists and 2 special remarks by 2 dignitaries and a special address by our own Honorable Minister of Civil Aviation. And we are going to continue this session for the next 1 hour and 15 minutes. The first panelist I would like to request on the dais is Sabyasachi Mitra, Deputy Country Director, Asian Development Bank, ADB. And due to time constraint, we request you to limit it to 3 to 5 minutes. And then if the time permits, we'll have a question and answer session at the end of this session. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Civil Aviation Minister, panelists, respected guests and colleagues. This morning I will briefly touch on our engagement in India, particularly the infrastructure sector, and within that I will particularly focus on our work in economic corridors. In fact, our work in economic corridors forms the bulwark of our country partnership engagement with India. We have committed under our new country partnership strategy with India to lend around $1 billion every year for the next 5 years on economic corridors. So let me first move on to the economic corridors program that we have been working in India. We have designed something called the East Coast Economic Corridor, which runs from Kanyakumari to Kolkata. And the first phase of this economic corridor is what we call the Vizag Chennai Industrial Corridor. We have, in fact, the first lending to our economic corridor program in India was in the Vizag Chennai Industrial Corridor. Along with the Andhra Pradesh government, we have prioritized 2 priority nodes and done the master planning of these 2 priority nodes in Vizag and near Srikalahasti. And based on these master planning of these 2 nodes, we have, in fact, prioritized around $4 billion worth of investment in the next few years in Andhra Pradesh in terms of the identification of projects. Now, the 2 projects, the 2 nodes that we have been identifying is somewhere in Vizag node and the other in Srikalahasti. In terms of, you can take a look at the slides, you can see the kind of industries. Vizag is, of course, a brownfield, very dynamic brownfield cluster. Our initial investment out here is to remove the binding constraints which are existing in Vizag, and looking at the 2 other greenfield locations that we have here in Vizag, and also looking at in Srikalahasti, which along with the existing other clusters forms a very dynamic, in fact has the potential to emerge into a very dynamic industrial cluster. And these are very well served by the ports out there, both in the northern cluster and in the southern cluster of Krishnapatnam and Chennai. So if you look at the major highlights of the master planning exercises, we have master planned around 33,500 acres, 11 industries with 17 subsectors, which is expected to generate over 1.7 million of jobs in the next couple of decades. And in the immediate run, in the next 3 to 5 years, projects worth over 4 billion have been identified. Now, all the detailed land use planning of these zones have been done. I will not go through in the detail. But just to let you know of the 2 greenfield projects that we are looking at is at Achutapuram and Nakapalli. Together, I think it's around, the startup area is around 1,600. And we also kind of mapped the industries that are likely to be located in these 2 greenfield locations in Vizag. The other one which we are looking at the startup is in the southern part, which is in Srikalahasti, and the startup area is around 4,000. Now, land availability is quite attractive here. As you can see in the Vizag node, by April 2018, we are expecting 90% of the land to be available. And for the south block, around 75% of the land to be available by middle of this year. Now, this exercise has been done more with a demand-driven exercise. where we have identified the likely anchor investors who are going to be in these locations, and based on the needs of these anchor industries, we have then planned the infrastructure. So if you look at the connectivity part of it, the NH16 is the network, and if you look at some of these, part of this network, it's quite congested, so which we are working on, and NHAI is working on improving these networks. But more specifically, our work will focus on strengthening the grid networks to the hinterland where the production centers or the demand centers are. Similarly, we are looking at the rail networks. Here we have tried to look at the supply chain networks and then link it up where the railway interventions need to be done and where these clusters are both in the north and southern part of the state. Now, in the urban, we have done both the planning for the urban transportation system, because you have these two greenfield, and we have tried to do a planning where the commute time, both of the workers, the supervisors, and the managers are limited within 30 minutes from where they work. So we have tried to do urban transport planning, and then we have mapped what is the need for urban utilities because of additional amount of workers that will be in these clusters. So if you can see that similarly we have mapped out the existing impact of these extra additional workforce and the kind of upgradation of urban infrastructure that is needed. Based on that, we have prioritized the investment. So if you see in the initial years, it's more of the trunk infrastructure in these nodes. But as we go forward, it is more of these urban infrastructures which needs to be upgraded quite heavily in these industrial nodes. So before I sum it, let me end that ADB through its Vizag Chennai Industrial Development Program is partnering very closely with Andhra Pradesh to build infrastructure, institutions, streamline processes. Particularly, we are very pleased to see the setting up of the Andhra Pradesh Industrial Development Corridor Authority, the APIGDA, and also streamlining of the processes. And we are also working on the skills component of how to enrich the human capital within this corridor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mitra, for the wonderful presentation on the VCIC corridor. Now I request Ms. Olga Kulikova, Business Ambassador from Business Russia to India. She's going to share her experience on how Russia funded infrastructure projects. Over to Olga.
Thank you. First of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this session. And I would like to, first of all, thank you for an opportunity to be a part of this event and to represent my country and all Business Russia organization, Business Russia, which is an association of SMEs. We are more than 5,000 companies based everywhere in Russia. Somehow all our companies, most of them, they have participated in different infrastructure projects. And keeping in mind that India and Russia have very good long-lasting relationship in different spheres, I would say that both countries, they face more or less similar challenges. Somehow, based on the experience that we have from our companies, from different areas, we have figured out a few ways of how it is better to finance the infrastructure projects. Of course, first of all, it is the classical means of financing, that is going to the bank and getting the loan, or going to the leasing company. That the leasing business is becoming more and more flourishing in Russia, and there are many companies who are there are many companies who are enjoying really good conditions in leasing now, and the new form of the so-called innovative leasing provides lots of opportunities for infrastructure projects. Also, we use different investment funds for financing of our projects. We have participated in different tenders, including Far East Development Funds, who actually help us in making our railroads and the airports. We also have few terminals in our east to be constructed on the shared basis. And apart from that, of course, what we have figured out is that the best way of financing the infrastructure project is the public-private partnership. If we speak about Russia, then the best actually way of having that agreement is when private company it comes with the money and government comes with the subsidies. Somehow both parties are enjoying very good conditions. And if we speak, for example, about shipping or port infrastructure, so in Russia right now, what we do is private companies, they come with the investments, and government, it subsidizes either the interest rate or it provides the payment, it refunds 2/3 of the construction price, for example. And taking into consideration that generally it is a very long money, starting from, let's say, 10, 15 years, this project becomes very valuable for both parties, and both private companies and government, they are enjoying long-lasting relation with constant cash flow income. Somehow I can't but mention that we really look forward to having different international cooperation. Since we're in BRICS company, I would say, with quite powerful friends like India. So we also are looking forward to participating in different international and some mutual projects. And I have already figured out that Andhra Pradesh is a wonderful state where we can enjoy, where we can get maybe very good, make very good cooperation and get good results. Somehow I also welcome you to come to Russia. This year we are hosting a World Cup, so the country is completely changed and it is waiting for you. So please come, and in case you need some help or anything else, you just call Business Russia, and we would gladly help you together on your personal and both personal and business visits. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga, for sharing your experience and offering to help us. I'm sure some of our projects will surely take their experience and will be able to utilize your experience. Now I request Mr. Jeffrey Clements, Chairman, Commonwealth Infrastructure Partners. He's going to address us on how to improve the organization capacity by bettering project implementation and using finance as another resource. Please, Jeffrey.
Thank you very much for this very warm welcome, and to my distinguished colleagues on the stage, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, congratulations on a wonderful partnership summit. I've had the pleasure of participating in all 3 summits here in the past 2.5 years, and the progress and development that you can observe in Andhra Pradesh during these 3 summits is absolutely remarkable. So we all give great congratulations to the Chief Minister and everyone working with him and participating in this great development. I would like to spend a few minutes just focusing on an area that is very often neglected or only partially considered in the development of infrastructure projects and infrastructure financing. And that, I'll use the phrase, organizational capacity building. Very often this is neglected. I've just been invited to deliver project management workshops for a large infrastructure finance company in Calcutta. And what they've described to me is that although money is available, projects are available, expertise is available, the difficulties that they have in organizing the financial resources and the physical resources effectively and delivering the projects on time and within budget. And very often these are straightforward matters that are concerned with the phrase that I've used, organizational capacity. So organizational capacity building is so important in all these areas, and it runs through every single stage of a project, from its initial concept to the financial planning, to the project implementation stage, project management, supervision, project handover when the project is going to be delivered to a public sector organization, and so on. And as we've seen in a number of the sessions in this summit, methods and technologies are developing so quickly. So if you have an infrastructure project, for example, for an airport or a port or a highway, you can't just use the methods that would have been used 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago, because those methods are now obsolete. Due to developments in digital technologies, which are really disruptive, they're non-linear in nature, one has to use the most recent methods and really be future-proof to use methods that are going to withstand the test of time. But also methods of funding, methods of financing. These are also evolving at a very rapid pace. And again, you can't just Xerox a financial plan for a project that was implemented 2 or 3 years ago. You have to develop everything using the most recent methods and the most recent technologies. One method that I'm fond of using is what I'd like to call the capacity building triangle. Very often projects fall flat or fail to deliver completely because of a mismatch in understanding between what we could say on one side is the management capability and on the other side is the technical or technological capability. Too often, and this is very often seen in the public sector, that managers are not familiar enough with the specialities of the sector in which they're working, and those who are involved in the technical development aren't sufficiently au fait with the management responsibilities and structures in the organization and in their project. And it's a matter of bringing those capabilities together, first of all, horizontally between the management and the management and the technical functions, but also vertically through all the different levels of the organization. So these are the areas that I feel are vital to include in the best resources of financial and physical resources for any project to make sure that projects can be delivered well and that projects are really superlative in nature. And in this, I think we really have to applaud everything that has been done in Andhra Pradesh over the last few years from a brand new state. And so in my observations in the last 2 to 3 years is that many of these elements are really being considered in a very detailed way. I think we were all very heartened to see the emphasis on education and training, the very efficient skills ministry and the other ministries in the Andhra Pradesh government and their links to public and private sector education organizations, which are really driving this forward. And I think we all look forward to seeing so much more progress taking place over the next few years. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jeffrey. Going forward, may I request the panelists to use the podium, because it looks like there is an echo and some other people are complaining. I request you to use the podium while addressing. Now I request Rizwan Sumar, CEO and Managing Director of DP World for the Indian subcontinent. He's from United Arab Emirates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and respected panelist, audience. So I represent Dubai Ports, which is a port company, a terminal management company, operating more than 78 terminals globally. In India, we are the largest terminal company. We have 6 concessions operating all across India. We are also into special economic zones and free trade warehousing zones. So the opening presentation my respected colleague on the panel made, which was about industrial zones and attracting pharma companies, auto companies, and other companies from the manufacturing sector. This was definitely music to my ears, because this will play in very well with Make in India to generate more cargo for the ports that we've actually built. Andhra Pradesh has been foremost in attracting port investments. We have some world-class ports in Andhra Pradesh, and you know, among the other 2 states in India, Andhra Pradesh has been absolutely the foremost in developing ports, which is basically testament to the fact that, you know, port-led infrastructure development definitely enables manufacturing to thrive. So these industrial zones, I have no doubts, will actually be immensely successful because of the connectivity that the ports would actually build. The other point that I wanted to make is that the road and rail connectivity is also extremely important, and I was very happy to note that in the presentation as well, that these industrial hubs will be very closely connected to the ports and the other industrial hubs in the country. The important aspect of industrial hubs is basically also to have logistics being part of it, to make sure that we have a port community system, as an example, which brings all the stakeholders, the exporters, the importers, the customs, the port operators, as well as the operators in the industrial zones, to actually be part of one platform, to make sure that we are digitally connected with each other, so that the handovers are very well managed, so there is more efficiency in terms of transactions. This port community system is something that Dubai Ports, the company that I represent, is operating very well in Dubai since 2003. And what we have found is that with one platform, you actually increase the efficiency of transactions. That's of course a given. But it also basically ensures that the data is transmitted once, and the transactions actually take place a lot faster than today in terms of the manual operation. So that is on the digital connectivity, which is critically important, the community system. For us, as DP World, we're very interested in actually developing logistics hubs in Andhra Pradesh, and I was extremely enthused to find the warm reception that we've actually got at this partnership summit. And we'll definitely explore areas of interest near the industrial zones, which are well connected to the ports, and we are here to actually open shop. We also have a terminal in Vizag, which we operate as a joint venture, and we will actually definitely want to expand that footprint in Andhra Pradesh in the months and the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rizwan. India and Vizag is not new to you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Now may I request Julian Bevis, Senior Director, Group Relations South Asia from Maersk Group. He's going to talk about how to attract investment into logistics and infrastructure. May I request you to address?
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Other members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, I must thank you very much indeed for according me the privilege of allowing me to speak at this very impressive conference. It is really impressive to see so much focus going on attracting investment, and to see the partnership which clearly is evolving between government at the state level here and industry of all sorts and kinds. The kind of industry I'm going to be talking about just for a few minutes is the logistics industry. I was introduced as somebody who was going to speak about ways in which one attracts finance. I must make it very clear that I'm not a financial person, and therefore I'm not going to go into the details of financial arrangements. What I am going to talk about, half a dozen, I think, of the sort of key policy areas that policy makers must think about when setting up infrastructure projects. And as I said, I'm talking about logistics infrastructure predominantly, and how they might address some of those policy settings with a view to attracting the finance, which in turn obviously will attract, hopefully, the necessary infrastructure. I think the first point to make is that the best regulator, at least in my humble opinion, is the market. There is a great tendency, I think, in some places for people to reach for the regulatory lever to deal with any policy issue. I think we have to try and move away from that and let the market do it. That is not to say that one can do away with regulation or indeed regulators. Certainly not. There are inefficient markets, there are market distortions around the place, and clearly therefore one needs regulation to deal with it. The point I'm making is that we need to try and evolve a situation where, as I said, the market does the regulation. The second point I'd make is that regulation, certainly in the infrastructure space, has to be allowed to evolve. Infrastructure, certainly logistics infrastructure, is a long game. things last for 30 and 40 years, and over that time the competitive, commercial, legislative environment will change. It therefore follows that the rules around a particular project must also be allowed to change. This is a very tricky policy area because it invites all sorts of difficult conversations, but it is one I think that regulators need to face up to. The third point, which leads on from that, is that we need to try and move away, if we can, from the notion that infrastructure is just about steel and concrete and cranes and railway lines and all the rest of it. As much as anything, infrastructure is about the regulatory environment. What are the rules? What are the rules that statutory bodies who impact the operation of that piece of infrastructure will abide by? And how will the operators of a particular project, for example, be rewarded? The next point I'd make is that it needs to be very clear, as projects evolve, how other bodies who operate facilities around those projects are expected to behave. It's no good allowing a port to be built without an eye on the responsibilities of road authorities, rail authorities, pipeline authorities. How do they impact that project? They too have responsibilities which need to be defined. A particular point that needs to be made in all of this is that logistics is increasingly about scale. We need to try and achieve economies of scale. We need to get scale to allow volumes which clearly are increasing, particularly in this country, to be able to be handled not just now, but in 5 and 10 years' time. If there isn't scale, then people don't have a choice. If people don't have a choice, then markets are not going to work. The point's already been made, but I make it again. One of the key points in infrastructure in India is inland connectivity. I've had the privilege of living and working in this country for getting on for 20 years now, and we've seen tremendous change in that time. And one of the key changes is the focus on the inland markets moving away from the ports. It follows, therefore, that inland connectivity is a key policy area. Not so much more ports, it's more connectivity and more ability to move cargo into and out of the ports. Logistics is a joined-up business. Policymakers have to try and find ways in which policy settings take into account road and rail and inland facilities and ports and all the rest of it. It's a big challenge, I know, easy to make the point, much more difficult to deal with it. The last point I'd make is one, again, that the previous speaker has mentioned, that is the real need for digitization, the ability for information to be exchanged electronically. Not just because it's easier, which obviously it is, but it makes things more transparent, it makes markets more effective, it cuts out intermediaries, it thereby reduces costs for everybody, and thereby will help reduce logistics costs overall. And this isn't just a systems issue, it's a hardware issue. We need to see port user community systems developed and operating whereby all users, all infrastructure users can talk to each other using a common language. All of this represents quite a formidable laundry list of policy issues. But I have no doubt that having seen the changes, the really positive changes which I've witnessed in this country over the last 20 years or so, and the positive developments that have taken place, I've no doubt that, led by states like this one, that we will see the country rise to those challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian, for sharing your thoughts, especially a special focus on the digital connectivity and infrastructure. Now may I request Ramesh David, CEO, South Asia Gateways Terminals Private Limited, Sri Lanka. He's going to talk about the connectivity between Vizag and Colombo, the transshipment hub, and the investment opportunities in Sri Lanka infrastructure, especially in the port area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen, first I'd like to extend my heartfelt thanks again for this opportunity to speak at this wonderful summit, as Julian said, extremely well organized. Good morning. I'd like to draw reference to the Honorable Chief Minister's opening remarks yesterday, where he said that the imperative really was integrating Andhra Pradesh and indeed India with global value chains. And a big part of that integration, or the success of that integration, will depend on connectivity. Connectivity to and from in terms of connecting trade and enabling trade. And although it has been for many years a source of some anxiety that a lot of East Coast India's trade actually flows over Colombo, we do not, as a port, we do not compete with any port in India. In fact, we complement all ports in India because we provide connectivity of the kind and nature in terms of timeliness, in terms of access, that exceeds any other regional port in terms of access to markets. So Colombo and Sri Lanka are tied inexorably to India's growth and India's growth aspirations, and ours are dependent on that. Colombo's port industry over the last 30 years, in 2017, the Port of Colombo was ranked 23rd in the world with a throughput of slightly over 6 million TEUs of containers. And over half of that volume is to and from India. So we are an integral part of India's connectivity and India's integration with the value chains that these states hope to aspire to. The second thing is that the alternatives, again, are other hubs. And whilst Sri Lanka has probably caused some anxiety in terms of various investments that have been made in the recent past, I think there should be no doubt that the absolute viability of Colombo and the dependence that Sri Lanka has on, in terms of, and the advantages it offers Indian trade are unbeatable. And in an effort to give impetus to this and to give more meaning to this, one of the things that the government 2 years ago did was announce that the next major investment in the port of Colombo mandated the government mandated an Indian investment and is seeking an investment of not less than 20% of equity share in the next port concession to be given out. And I think these measures should be viewed in the context of the importance that Sri Lanka places on the relationship and the connectivity that complement India's growth and growth aspirations. So with that, I'd like to conclude because I think we are running a bit short on time, but I'd like once again to thank CII for this opportunity and wish the summit every success.
Thank you, Ramesh, for addressing us. Now I request Mr. N. Sivasailam, Special Secretary, Department of Telecommunications, Ministry of Communications, Government of India. He's going to address us on the digital regulatory framework. This is a PowerPoint presentation. Gentlemen, can you keep... Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Respected Union Minister, dignitaries on the dais, very respectful dignitaries of the dais, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me here. It's my pleasure to present to you some aspects of what we are doing in the connectivity field, but relating to communications. Generally, Ministry of Communications is a very low-profile department. We generally do not participate in this. It's one of the first partnership summits which we are participating. But there are certain very important aspects which we thought we will showcase the general public about what are the changes likely to be expected over the next 3 to 6 months, which may have far-reaching implications in the way business is conducted in this country. How do I go back? Okay. I have titled this as based on the profile which we had received and the guidelines which we had received. How do we make in India 2.0 for Industry 4.0? The whole idea is to transform the industry, go to a next level, which all of us are aware as 4.0, which is largely going to be ICT-led. And we call it Make in India 2.0 because we find that when you get into an Industry 4.0, you require a different set of rules and guidelines, and the manner of doing business would be a little different. And therefore, the way Make in India is construed would be a little different as well. And how are we looking at Industry 4.0? We look at Industry 4.0 as to creating 100 million jobs. I mean, we find that any amount of technological innovation in industry would be meaningless if we are able to not generate livelihoods by creating 100 million jobs. And when we talk about Make in India, we find that we require new policy which focuses on entrepreneurship as the way forward to creating employment rather than just jobs per se in standard sectors as we know. I would like to bring to your notice certain very key developments which are taking place in this country. We were maybe till about 3 to 6 months ago, we were talking of whether we are going to have 5G or not. But it's no longer the issue for discussion. The question is when it is going to come. The present date set is the maturity date for 5G. Repeat, the maturity date for 5G is set to be 2022, with the standards getting finalized as early as 2019. And it could be a little early because your Tokyo Olympics is going to have a demonstration, a full-fledged demonstration of 5G technologies. And several countries, and Russia is already here. Russia is having a good lead in certain aspects of 5G, particularly on the security systems. Several other countries, Korea is well ahead. US has already launched 5G. There are several applications which have already come over the last quarter. Britain has got a good ecosystem on 5G, and not to forget Japan, which is already there. The important thing is India is already there for the first time. We were generally not part of the telecom ecosystems internationally, but for the first time India is part of the 5G development. So you're not going to have 5G maybe 5 or 10 years after it is launched in the world, but you're likely to have 5G around the same time as the world gets it. So because we are also part of the 5G ecosystem. A large number of application areas which relates to 5G. When we talk of 5G, we talk of IoTs and M2M communications, machine to machine, and a whole lot of device-based ecosystems, which has important implications for Industry 4.0. And already, as I have listed, there are large-scale use cases in agriculture, water management, fisheries, mobility, manufacture, health, education, mining. I have not listed industry because that's the focus of our discussion. And manufacturing is a key because in all these there are a set of manufacturers which we have never done before. And IoT and M2M, that is the 5G technologies, enable us to do it. And this is particularly important if you want to catch the wave as it goes up. New technologies such as Cloud RAN and SDN, on which 5G is generally based, are important because they have a whole lot of software content and they have got simple devices. The important thing about 5G is some of the devices are going to be massive, but they are going to be simple. So it's time we enter into it because a whole lot of device-based ecosystems, manufacturing would depend upon the way we are able to get into the technology, manufacturing technology, to be able to make innovations in Cloud RAN and software-defined networks. The most important thing is it's going to be disruptive, as was already mentioned. And possibly we feel that communication as a separate area hitherto may cease, and it may truly get integrated with IT. And that's going to be a major domain-changing experience for a whole lot of us. Are we up to the challenge? This is a question not only for in a partnership summit like this. It's very important to know whether India is ready and whether partnership with India is possible and desirable. And the answer to all that is yes. And one of the reasons is we are in the midst of a national telecom policy which will address these issues. And the telecom policy was anytime, the first draft is already through. If you want to have a glimpse of shape of things to come, you already have the TRAI, the regulator, which has already given its recommendations. It's available on the TRAI website. It can give you an idea about the shape of things to come. If you ask me, there are a lot of elements which may be a game changer. You can have an idea from the TRAI website. I am a participant in the policy making space in this sector, but I would leave it to people who have the privilege of announcing it sometime later to do the honors. But you can definitely have a glimpse of the shape of things to come from the TRAI website. Another important thing is for the first time in the budget, there is an announcement that India has developed a test bed. It's a very small, you can say, what is so great about announcing a test bed with something like 250 crores, which is a small amount for India. The important thing lies in the fact that it's a collaborative venture of almost 16 institutions, including the IITs and the Indian Institute of Science, besides a whole lot of manufacturing enterprises and the service providers. We have never had a coalition of commonality of purposes ever gathered to create an ecosystem space. A third important item is we have a high-level policy forum, which is called the 5G Forum. Details are available in the DOT, Department of Telecom website. It contains the best of in the country and the best of the industry and academia participating in it. Professor Paul Raj, who has just conferred the Innovators Hall of Fame, and one of the only 6 recipients in the Hall of Fame of Innovators. He is the mentor, and we are likely to come up with a total blueprint on how we plan to do it, certainly from the time of April to September, when certain papers will be rolled out. Last but not the least, something which is very important for our industry, India is part of the standards setting in 5G. Our standard of low mobility large cell has been accepted as a standard in the 5G ecosystem. That has got implications for how standard essential patents are going to be, how are we going to have the standard essential patents ecosystem, particularly in terms of payments, of royalty and things like that. And it's a major area of interest to our industry. Manufacturing issue. I'm flagging off only two or three issues. We could debate a whole day, but a time has come for India to enter the fab ecosystem. The more we delay it, the more it's going to be difficult to enter this arena. And the fab ecosystem is something which doesn't have too much of margins. So if you are going to go by our standard national norms of 20 to 30% value additions, we may not be in business in this sector. But we need to have them in order to have to scale a march on IPs, IPRs, and product development systems, and also future technologies. And one of the key elements is we need to have our guys there who get the necessary hands-on experience in this system.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. We have one more minute to go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just finish off after this one. I have, this is my last slide on financing options. We have an option. There are many options. You may say loans could be raised, external monies. They're all in their places. But we need to get our act together to fund startups. And the best way to do up without spoiling the ecosystem is to leverage the imports. Government policies on procurement also deserves a large change. As you can see, we need to have a different method of doing business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sivasailam, for sharing your the presentation. Especially the 5G by 2020 looks like a boost in the arm for the Indian telecom sector. And when we have some industry 4.0 and people are worried about losing jobs, we are talking about creating 100 million jobs. That once again is a boost in the arm. Hopefully, that will surely come into the space. With this, thank you very much once again for the wonderful presentation. Now, may I request Baroness Sandeep Verma, member of House of Lords from United Kingdom, to address us. She's going to talk about ease of regulatory framework and digital stock mechanisms.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to you all. Honourable Minister for Aviation, my fellow panellists, ladies and gentlemen. What I'd like to just focus a few minutes on is the relationship that the United Kingdom has with India. And given that we are looking at Brexit, of course, it means that we want to expand our own footprint into new markets. And we believe in the UK that the opportunities that arise from our relationships that we already have here, that those relationships can only be strengthened from. And so looking at regulation, which is something UK has been extremely good at, and as a former minister, what I know about policy making and regulation is that if you want things to be an accepted elevator of business and industry, then what you don't do is put in place hurdles such as impractical regulations and unworkable policies. And so I think the opportunities that lie here between us and the UK is that we already have a stack of digital interventions that have helped us in the UK do business much more easier. We are one of the easiest places in the world to set up a business, to be able to deliver in a business, and that has been because we have made the processes much easier. But nobody really this morning has spoken about the other infrastructure that we do need to look at, and that is people. The development of people, the skilling of people, the ability for people to be able to join in the digital movement that we are undergoing currently. And, my former speaker has just talked about the 5G coming into India by 2022. I think the fact that we are moving at such a pace, and what we do know is that countries are now looking at artificial intelligence as key components of industry, that we will look at technologies that we don't actually see today but are in development as taking over some of the key roles of the workplace as we see it, but that has to be vested with people being able to operate. And this morning's session with Guru Ravi Shankar and the Chief Minister was very much focused on how do we ensure that people are at the center, at the heart of the development of infrastructures. And so my focus really should be that when we do talk about logistics, when we do talk about connectivity, when we do talk about communications, all of those are mindful of the workforce. And if the workforce isn't getting the skills and the resources needed to build up that base, then of course countries don't develop at the pace that technologies are developing at. An interesting thing that I've learned in the short time I've been here and speaking to people is that Andhra Pradesh has demonstrated that working with business allows us to develop at a pace where others are getting in the way by putting in obstacles of taking lengthy periods of time to get processes done, the Chief Minister said this morning that everything will be available online. Everything will be available through the internet. And that therefore leads to the question that the accessibility of making sure that you are able to connect, that you are able to have technologies at hand, is accessible to everyone. The mobile phone has now not just become an instrument of communication for telephones, but of course it sends messages, it receives messages, it allows us actually to operate on a mobile working office. I mean, I'm doing my work with the UK as I'm sitting in India. So I think it's really important that we do see the streamlining of processes here. And the final sort of remarks that I do have is around about sharing. Sharing our technologies, sharing the ability for our inward investment to come, and have an ease of being able to do partnership work with companies already here. I bring delegations from the UK to India, and I do want to congratulate the facilitators of this summit today, CII, who I work very closely with, because working with organizations that already know what the legal regulatory frameworks are here helps people like me to be able to ensure that businesses that I bring are able to interoperate with the legal requirements that the British businesses that are coming here are able to underoperate. But I leave you with one thought. Whilst we talk about fast tracking, and whilst we talk about infrastructure development, sometimes we do need to also take a step back and remind ourselves that in the rush to fast track everything, that we don't forget to future-proof. We do have increased populations, we do have demands, huge demand, extra demands on the need for energy, on the need for road space, on the need for incorporating artificial intelligence, on the need to incorporate electrical vehicles that will no doubt be taking over from diesel vehicles and petrol vehicles. We do need to make sure we take a step back to ensure that we are also building those into the infrastructure today. Otherwise, we will be doing a catch-up of doing bolt-ons rather than integrating systems, and those systems then always work better having had the future-proofing already put into place. And on that note, I thank you all very much for allowing me to come and join you here today.
Thank you, Ms. Verma, for the special address. Now I request our Honorable Minister for Civil Aviation, Sri Ashok Gajapati Garu, to give his address.
Dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. Coming from these parts, in a way I'm local here. We are delighted that CII and the state government both are hosting these conferences in Visakhapatnam. One of the cleanest cities in India. And we were fortunate this morning to hear Guruji Ravi Shankar ji giving his message to us. All this is fine. Technology will continue. Change is a continuous process. If we stop changing for the better, we start changing for the worse. Now, how do we harness this technology for the upliftment of mankind is going to be, I think, the serious challenge of the future. Of course, I'm from, temporarily I would say, connected with aviation. And aviation in India, in a way, is a success story. We were the last, about 3-4 years back, we were considered the 9th largest aviation market in the world, and domestically, and now we are probably already reached the 3rd place in the world. But aviation is all about connecting people. Of course, it has a multiplier effect in the economy, both in jobs and in investment. India is a big country, and economically it is behaving properly. It's going ahead. In fact, if I present the aviation scenario, roughly 70 years into independence, 73, 74 destinations where commercial aircraft would connect. And since this regional connectivity has come on, we are looking at 80 destinations. Adding up, probably not many countries will have that many destinations. India is a vast country. Aviation should not lose its focus of people. Of course, burning fuel is a highly polluting activity also. But Indian airports have already 90 megawatts of solar, a ballpark figure of 1 megawatt to 1 ton of CO2 gases, and this is going to go up. Any technology, any activity has to ultimately benefit people. If it doesn't benefit people, it doesn't make sense. Here in Andhra Pradesh, probably even technology is making language, it's becoming language neutral like thing. So a technology will be able to open the world to the thoughts of the world. But these parts, the dominant language is Telugu. And in Telugu culture, we have a poet here called Gurjada Apparao. He also was from these parts. He showed a way out. Regulations are all fine, laws are all fine, policies are fine, but people matter. Particularly in the social structure. Pre-independence, the British ruled us. They allowed certain socially bad practices to happen. There was a practice in these parts where the girl child used to be sold to elderly old people, literally as their slaves. It used to be called Kanya Shulkam. Some of the locals, forward-looking people at that particular point of time, they said, the British, since you are ruling us, you should give us a legislative framework to overcome this problem. It is the genius of Gurjada Apparao, when that opportunity was denied, to come out with a play. I don't know how much Shakespeare impacted Britain, but Gurjada Apparao definitely impacted the Telugus, and that play generated such an awareness that this social evil was removed. Come independence, there was that evil practice was also not there. So nobody needed a legislation. I don't have to tell Indians. Social legislation, we have had the Anti-Dowry Act for decades, but nobody in their right minds believes that India has eradicated the evil practice of dowry. Regulation has to be meaningful. What is the regulation for? It is to see that any nefarious activity does not come out of the activity that happens. Now, the good should be encouraged, the bad should be discouraged. So obviously regulation will need attention. I am asked, why don't we have regulation for drones? It's a new area. Drones' capabilities are tremendous. In fact, state governments are using drones nowadays, and you would have seen drone-related surveys also happening. It obviously has a humanitarian use also, but it needs regulation. It should not carry a payload, should not be so unidentifiable that it can become a threat to human life. This is an important thing. Policy, again, policies are for a particular purpose. They are not truth for all time. They are not religions that are truth for all time. But without proper policies, economic activity does not feel comfortable in investing. So that's why in aviation we brought out a policy, and we have taken India to a different level. Of course, the same thing can apply to all economic activity. So it is nice, it is lovely to see all of you here today, because it is a people-to-people contact. You can communicate any type of information, and probably as days go by, these things will become faster and faster. But I think in the human race, the human being is the most important person, most important thing. And that should never be lost sight of. I know we are all responsible people. We have come here to interact on economic activity, create jobs, and solve some of our problems. So we are with you. Government of India is with you. Of course, the state government is also with you. So let us go in that direction and help the human race in raising its standard of life. Thank you one and all. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for your address. Sir, while you were addressing, Ms. Verma was actually talking about connecting with people, and you have rightly touched upon that point. And you mentioned about all the connection, communication and connectivity, and most importantly, connecting with people is very important. And you mentioned and give an example of Gurjada Parao, where he connected with the local people, which I'm also a local, so I understand what he's saying. Thank you very much. You have taken the subject to a different level, and the connectivity and communication is talked about at a different in a different platform. With this, we have just come to the end of the session. Let me see if I have some more time. What time is the next session? Can I? 5 minutes? Thank you so much. Is everyone okay with a Q&A? I know you have some time constraints. Other than my fellow panelists, can I go ahead with the Q&A? No? All right. So we'll take the questions off the air. So I'll conclude the session. I have some gentlemen who have to leave. First of all, I want to thank all my fellow panelists for sticking to the time with no time overrun. We have completed the session well within time. And I want to thank all of you for joining us here in Visakhapatnam. You have come from your respective countries and cities and being a part of this partnership summit, sharing your experiences and thoughts on how Andhra Pradesh and especially the Partnership Summit can be a success. And I want to thank you once again for joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. And thank you, Shiv Kumar sir, for moderating the session so well. Ladies and gentlemen, all our panelists will be available offline in case there are any queries or questions that you'd like to clear. Once again, expressing our gratitude to all our speakers and panelists for coming all the way and sharing their expertise with all of us. We'll have a group picture for all the speakers of the session. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Our next session starts immediately. Please allow us a couple of minutes to set the stage for the next session. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the day 3 of the CII Partnership Summit 2018. We are active on Twitter and our Twitter handle is #PartnershipSummit2018. Please do feel free to join the conversation. We'll begin with our next session in just about a few moments. We appreciate your patience. And of course, at the later part of the day, we have a valedictory session where our Honorable Governor of Andhra Pradesh will be joining us.